So welcome back everyone to part 2 of tight hips and a wonky knee. In the first part, we did some work on our back, lying with our feet at the wall. Today, we're going to do some standing work, still using the wall for support. So please come up onto your feet. And coming into mountain pose. In part 1, we started with mountain pose, reclining on our back with our legs and feet pressing into the wall. So taking that into this vertical stance. And once again, though, seeing if you can find some energy in the legs, reaching out of the pelvis from the outer seams of the legs, from the hips into the outer heels and the mounds of the baby toes. And as you do that, just noticing what that feels like in the ankles, in the knees, the outer knees, and the hips. How it might feel like you're rolling quite a bit onto the outer edges of the feet, coming into supination, which is the soles of the feet turning towards each other or turning towards the midline. And then let's go from the groins, so the inner seams of the legs, from the tops of the inner thighs, down through the inner knees, inner ankles, through the arches, and through the mounds of the big toes and the baby toes. And again, just notice how that feels for your knees, for your ankles, for your feet. How does that change the position of your pelvis? A little bit of pronation happening here in the feet, soles of the feet turning away from each other. So release that and just roll a few times down the length of your feet. And let's find a place where now the outer lines of the legs and the inner lines of the legs reaching into the ground at the same time, finding some balance of effort in both legs. The four corners of the feet now all equally catching the weight of the body. Yeah. And allowing the spine to lengthen up through the crown of the head. Coming into Tadasana. Great. Now we're going to take this to the wall, and I'd like us to position the feet so that you're about maybe 8 inches or so, 6 inches or so away from the wall. So when you bend your knees, you could rest your pelvis back onto the wall. And then we're going to work with the feet parallel and the thighs parallel. If this already causes discomfort in your knees, you might need to turn your feet out a little bit, turn your knees out so that they're tracking over the feet. Otherwise, let's see if we can bring the feet parallel, thighs parallel, about hip width apart. And the pelvis is at the wall, so the wall's catching the weight of the torso. There's still some weight bearing down on the knees and the feet, but not so much if we were to do this in a squat away from the wall. Okay. And then from here, we're going to bend forward, and you can bring your hands onto your knees or your thighs. And as we bend forward, this action is coming from your hip joints, right? So I'm taking my torso and tipping my pelvis forward to bring my torso over the thighs, coming into this forward bend. And when you do that, you'll feel the sitting bones sliding up the wall a little bit. Let's just do that again. So from here, I'm rolling the pelvis forward. So my sitting bones feel like they're sliding up the wall a little bit, and my spine stays in this nice long neutral shape. So from here, we're going to do some cat stretches, and that means we're going to turn now the pelvis under, so the tailbone reaching towards the floor, and then letting the rest of the spine follow. So we come into this rounded cat back. Let your head hang here, right? So feeling some length and stretch in the back body. And then we're going to go into an upward facing cat. So sliding or tipping the pelvis forward and coming into an arched back, letting your head look up, shoulders draw back. And the spine then comes into extension, a little bit of a back bend there as you lengthen through the front body. Okay, let's just go through those 2 movements a few more times and being conscious of the movement coming from the pelvis, right? Tipping forward into this upward facing cat and tucking under, coming into downward facing cat. Right? Staying aware of the anterior tilt of the pelvis and the posterior tilt of the pelvis. So working into those hip joints. While at the same time, there's some weight bearing in the legs. And so we're also creating some strength in the muscles around the knees. And when you're ready, let's lengthen the spine, bring it into neutral, push into the ground, and come all the way up. Wonderful. And then let's come away from the wall. Good. And back into mountain pose. Once again, finding the legs reaching out of the pelvis, outer seams, inner seams, spine lengthening up. Just pause here, noticing where you feel the work, right? How's that feel in the hips, in the legs, in the knees? So good. From here, we're going to shift our weight into the right leg so that the left leg can lift up and the left foot floats off the floor. Good. And then placing the left foot down, shifting your weight into the left leg so that the right foot floats off the floor. Yeah, it's balancing pose. So finding your center of gravity here as you balance on one leg. Soften the knees a little bit so that you're not locking the joints. And then let's shift back into the right leg. The left foot comes up. Now this time, we're going to step that left foot right in front of the right foot. So the right toes are touching the back of the left heel. And finding your balance here. If your balance is really challenged today, you could use the wall or a chair. Otherwise, see if you can find your center of gravity here as though you're on a balance beam. But know that you're perfectly safe to fall, right? So to allow yourself to tip off your balance beam if you need to, and then place that left foot in front of the right foot again. And see if you can find that energy, those lines of energy from the outer hips into the outer edges of the feet, the inner lines of the legs into the inner edges of the feet. Wonderful. Now we're going to shift our weight into the left leg so that the right foot lifts up and bending the knees just a little. Right? We're going to cross this right leg over the left. Tiny little bend in the knees. So, and keeping the right toes on the floor so that we are in eagle pose, Garudasana, without going into a huge bend in the knees. It's just enough to catch some weight, strengthening the inner and outer knees. Okay, good. The spine staying tall. You might take your arms wide like eagle wings. That can help to keep the upper body light and lifted. Yeah. While the legs help us to find our steadiness and find the ground. Beautiful. Let your arms come down and then step out. Good. You could pause in mountain pose again just to notice how that feels. Okay, other side. We're going to shift our weight into the right leg. Let the left foot come in front. Finding some even effort through both legs, outer and inner. And then shifting so that your weight is in the front leg and the other leg lifts and steps in front of the left foot. Shifting your weight into the right leg, lifting the left leg, bending the knees a little and sweeping that left leg over, keeping your toes on the floor. Remember, this is for tight hips, wonky knee. So we don't want to put too much weight in the knees, but we also want to strengthen them. So a little bend and a little crossing over the midline also helps to stretch the outer hips. And then take your eagle arms wide, lifting heart, lifting lungs, while the legs reach into the ground through the inner and outer seams. Great. And then releasing the arms and stepping out back into mountain pose. And if you have time, I'd suggest doing each side again. And that's all the time we have for part 2. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope that was helpful. We'll see you again.